I'll give you half of my empire if you serve me in Mandarin, the Mafia boss laughed, his voice slicing through the gentle hum of conversation at Nate's bistro. His associate smirked as he reclined in his seat, eyes locked on the young server whose badge read, Emma. Emma's grip tightened on her order pad, her pulse quickening as she maintained a practiced smile. Beneath that professional mask, her mind raced through desperate calculations. Student loans were crushing her. Her younger brother's therapy sessions had tripled in cost after the accident. Her part-time shifts barely kept them afloat. The man before her, known only as Jackson to most people, wore his power like a second skin. His tailored suit and platinum watch announced wealth, while the barely concealed holster beneath his jacket whispered danger to anyone paying attention. I spent 6 years studying Mandarin before I dropped out to work full-time, Emma replied in flawless Mandarin, her pronunciation so authentic it momentarily silenced Jackson mid-laugh. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Jackson's confident smirk dissolved into genuine shock, his eyes widening as he processed what had just occurred. The men flanking him shifted uncomfortably, unaccustomed to seeing their leader caught off guard by anyone, least of all a server in a modest Chicago bistro. Come to my office tomorrow. 2 o'clock, Jackson said, sliding an embossed business card across the table while maintaining intense eye contact. My empire as promised. Plus a conversation about how someone with your skills is wasting away in a place like this. Emma accepted the card with trembling fingers, understanding this moment represented both salvation and damnation. The address belonged to the Sterling Tower, one of Chicago's most exclusive buildings that people like her only glimpsed from street level. Her manager, Tony, watched nervously from the doorway, already mourning the loss of his best employee. He'd warned his entire staff about Jackson Nate's visits. Be polite, be efficient, never engage beyond the minimum. The remainder of Emma's shift dissolved into a blur, her mind replaying that moment of defiance repeatedly. Had she impressed a dangerous man, or merely painted a target on herself by revealing capabilities she'd kept hidden? Walking home that night, clutching her keys like a weapon, Emma thought about her brother Michael's mounting therapy bills. An empire, even metaphorically, would cover years of treatment, by time while she found a sustainable solution to their financial nightmare. Her cramped studio apartment felt suffocating that evening, the walls pressing in as she paced the worn carpet. Taking anything from a criminal violated every principle she'd established for herself. Yet desperation had a way of redrawing moral boundaries. Dawn arrived after a sleepless night, pale light filtering through thin curtains as Emma stared at the business card. The raised lettering seemed to pulse with promise and peril. Jackson Nate, International Acquisitions, followed by contact information. At precisely 1:58 p.m., Emma stepped into Sterling Tower's gleaming lobby, her second-hand clothes drawing glances from security personnel. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like ascending into another dimension, one where people like her existed only as service staff. Ah, the talented server arrives, Jackson announced as his assistant ushered Emma into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. He gestured toward a leather chair facing his imposing desk, studying her with calculated interest. A manila envelope slid across the polished mahogany surface, visibly thick with currency. Payment for a simple linguistic exchange, he said smoothly. A woman who masters Mandarin while working minimum wage possesses rare determination, Jackson continued, leaning forward with unsettling intensity. My organization requires someone with your abilities for delicate negotiations with our Beijing partners. Emma's fingers hovered over the envelope, internal conflict visible in her hesitation. I'm just a server trying to finish college and support my brother, she replied, knowing even as she spoke that her simple life had already begun unraveling. Jackson's laugh carried unexpected warmth, creating jarring contrast with the coldness in his eyes. We all wear masks, Emma Torres. Yours as a struggling student, mine as a businessman whose interests blur legal boundaries. The view from his office showcased a city divided, gleaming towers alongside neighborhoods where people like Emma fought daily battles for survival. The metaphor wasn't lost on her as she reluctantly accepted both the money and his proposition. Triple your current income, flexible scheduling around classes, and complete coverage of your brother's therapy, Jackson listed the terms while pouring amber liquid into crystal glasses. All for accompanying me to meetings and ensuring nothing is lost in translation. Emma took a careful sip, wincing as expensive scotch burned down her throat. The offer represented everything she needed, wrapped in a package she knew was poisonous to accept. Michael's face flashed through her mind, his brave smile that couldn't mask the trauma still haunting him since the car accident that killed their parents. What exactly would these translations involve? She asked, already suspecting answers that would compromise her ethics. Nothing that should trouble your conscience excessively, Jackson replied with practiced ease, though his gaze sharpened at her question. Business negotiations, cultural subtleties that escape me despite my conversational Mandarin. Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock before a man entered without awaiting permission. Vincent, Jackson's second-in-command, cast a suspicious glance at Emma before whispering urgently about shipment complications. Jackson's expression darkened momentarily before he dismissed Vincent with a casual gesture. First assignment, dinner tonight with associates from Shanghai who prefer conducting negotiations in their native tongue, he said, his tone making refusal impossible. That evening, dressed in clothing hastily purchased with Jackson's advance payment, Emma entered the private dining room at Azure, Chicago's most exclusive restaurant. 6 men turned to evaluate her with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. My new cultural liaison, Jackson introduced her with a proprietary hand on her lower back that made Emma suppress the urge to pull away. She'll ensure our discussions lose nothing in translation this evening. The eldest Chinese businessman, a man with silver-streaked hair and calculating eyes, addressed her directly in Mandarin. So young to navigate our world. Does she understand what happens to those who misinterpret sensitive conversations? Emma swallowed hard, translating his words precisely for Jackson while omitting the threatening undertone. Her first lesson in this dangerous new role crystallized instantly, some meanings were better left unsaid. Jackson's smile never reached his eyes as he responded through Emma, each exchange revealing layers of meaning and hidden agendas. She was no longer simply translating words, but navigating a treacherous web of power, threats, and negotiation. 3 weeks into her new role, Emma developed a routine: hospital visits with Michael in the mornings, classes when possible, evenings spent in luxury venues where Jackson conducted business. The double life was exhausting but financially liberating. Your sister seems happier lately, Michael's therapist commented during a session. Whatever changes you've made are clearly reducing your stress levels. If only they knew, Emma thought bitterly as she smiled and agreed. The physical toll of her secret life was hidden beneath designer makeup. Jackson insisted his translator always wear to appear polished and professional. In Jackson's world, Emma observed a complex hierarchy that reminded her of nature documentaries: displays of dominance, careful challenges, and constant threat of violence lurking beneath civilized conversations. She learned to read rooms before words were spoken. You're a natural, Jackson commented after a particularly tense meeting with Korean suppliers concluded successfully. Most people in your position would crack under pressure or attempt to exploit their knowledge for personal gain. Emma recognized the statement for what it was, both compliment and warning. I'm just doing the job you're paying me for, she replied carefully, maintaining professional distance that had kept her safe so far. The line between professional obligation and personal involvement began blurring as Jackson increasingly requested her presence at events unrelated to business. My associates find you intriguing, he explained when she questioned attending a museum gala. That night, watching Jackson charm politicians and art collectors with the same ease he intimidated rivals, Emma glimpsed something unexpected: genuine passion when discussing classical Chinese painting with a curator, a flash of vulnerability when mentioning his childhood. He wasn't always this way, whispered Catherine, the elegant wife of one of Jackson's associates, noticing Emma's observation. Before his family was murdered, Jackson studied art history and calligraphy, talents buried under necessity and vengeance. The information shifted Emma's perception, complicating her neatly categorized view of Jackson as simply a dangerous criminal. Recognizing he contained depths beyond his fearsome reputation made her job both easier and infinitely more complicated. Her university friends drifted away, unable to relate to vague explanations about her new position and increasingly expensive possessions. The isolation pushed her further into Jackson's orbit, where at least she understood the rules, however dangerous. One rainy afternoon, Jackson unexpectedly asked about her classes, displaying surprising knowledge about her linguistics major. Confucius understood that language shapes reality, not merely describes it, he commented while reviewing business documents. Their conversation about Chinese philosophy continued for hours, revealing a side of Jackson few were privileged to witness. When he described childhood dreams of becoming a professor before family obligations intervened, Emma recognized the shadow of regret in his voice. Perhaps in another life, Jackson concluded with uncharacteristic softness before his phone rang and his expression hardened once more. The glimpse behind his carefully constructed facade vanished as quickly as it appeared. Later that night, lying awake in her new apartment, a security necessity according to Jackson, Emma confronted an uncomfortable truth. The line separating her from the world she'd entered was thinning, and her moral objections were weakening with each passing day. The Mandarin lessons began unexpectedly one evening in Jackson's penthouse as he struggled with pronunciation for an upcoming meeting. "Teach me properly," he demanded, pushing aside financial reports to make space for language practice. Emma discovered Jackson was a demanding but dedicated student, approaching language acquisition with the same intensity he brought to business negotiations. His frustration when unable to master certain tones revealed perfectionism that extended beyond criminal enterprises. "My father insisted Mandarin was the language of servants and enemies," Jackson confessed during their third lesson. "But I always found it beautiful, especially when my mother would recite poetry she thought I was too young to understand." Their lessons evolved into cultural exchanges, Emma sharing stories from her grandmother while Jackson revealed fragments of his fractured childhood. The power dynamic shifted subtly during these moments, equalizing in ways that made both uncomfortable yet intrigued. During their fourth lesson, Emma discovered a portfolio tucked beneath business files, drawings executed with remarkable talent showing Beijing's Forbidden City at dawn. Jackson snatched it away with uncharacteristic embarrassment, a glimpse of artistic sensitivity at odds with his brutal reputation. "My mother was Chinese," Jackson revealed unexpectedly one evening, the confession emerging after several glasses of baijiu. "Father forbade her language in our home after marriage, a control tactic that broke her spirit years before illness took her body." As autumn deepened, their lessons moved beyond language to cultural immersion. Jackson's private chef prepared traditional Chinese dishes, while Emma selected classic films from her heritage. These cultural bridges revealed commonalities neither had anticipated finding in the other. "You remind me of someone," Jackson said one evening, his guard momentarily lowered. "A girl from my neighborhood who saw potential in me before circumstances forced different paths." Emma carefully maintained professional boundaries despite these growing personal connections, aware of the dangers of misinterpreting their relationship. Jackson might show glimpses of humanity, but his business remained built on exploitation and violence. The first time she witnessed that violence firsthand came during a routine translation at a riverside warehouse. A supplier who'd betrayed the organization knelt bleeding on concrete, while Vincent stood over him with brass knuckles gleaming under fluorescent lights. "Tell him his options in his language," Jackson instructed calmly, as if requesting a menu translation rather than delivering life-or-death ultimatums. "Make certain he understands exactly what betrayal costs in our organization." Emma's hands trembled as she relayed the message, her voice steadier than she felt. The man's terrified eyes locked with hers, pleading silently for mercy she had no authority to grant in this brutal world she'd entered. That night, alone in her shower, Emma scrubbed her hands until they were raw, trying to wash away the moral compromise of her participation. The salary that once seemed worth any ethical flexibility now felt heavy with the weight of complicity. The following morning, Jackson appeared at her door unannounced. Expression unreadable as he studied the dark circles under her eyes. "The first time is always difficult," he said simply, offering no apology but a strange acknowledgement of her distress. Instead of business, he suggested breakfast at a small dumpling shop owned by an elderly Chinese couple. There, surrounded by the familiar comfort of her culture's food and language, Emma watched as Jackson charmed the owners with respectful Mandarin phrases she'd taught him. "Not everyone sees this side of you," Emma observed as they walked back to his car, their breath visible in the crisp morning air. "Why show it to me?" Jackson's answer came after a thoughtful pause. "Perhaps because you're the only person who speaks to me in two languages, the one I use for business and the one that reminds me of simpler times." The complexity of their relationship deepened when Michael experienced a psychological crisis, requiring specialized treatment not covered by insurance. Without hesitation, Jackson arranged for a specialist from Johns Hopkins, dismissing Emma's protests with unexpected gentleness. Vincent's growing resentment became increasingly obvious during strategy meetings, his eyes following Emma with undisguised suspicion as her influence with Jackson expanded beyond simple translation. The power shift threatened his position as Jackson's most trusted advisor. "She knows too much about our operations for someone so new," Vincent warned Jackson in English, assuming Emma wouldn't understand his heavily accented words from across the room. "Your fascination with this girl compromises years of careful work." Jackson dismissed these concerns publicly, but Emma noticed increased security around her apartment and a driver suddenly available for all her commutes. Protection or surveillance, perhaps both, indicated Jackson shared some of Vincent's concerns about her role. The first sign of active betrayal came disguised as a delivery, documents requiring urgent translation for a meeting Emma hadn't been informed about. The papers contained shipping manifests with details far more incriminating than anything she'd previously accessed. "Did Jackson send these directly?" she asked the courier, instinct warning her something was wrong about the unusual delivery protocol and sensitive nature of the contents. The man nodded unconvincingly before hurrying away. That evening, while waiting in Jackson's office to clarify the translation request, Emma overheard Vincent in the adjacent room speaking rapidly on the phone. "Once she translates those documents, her fingerprints will be all over the evidence when it reaches federal prosecutors." Realization washed over her like ice water. Vincent was orchestrating her downfall to eliminate her from Jackson's inner circle, while simultaneously destroying Jackson's operation. The carefully constructed trap would devastate her life while preserving Vincent's position of power. Surveillance footage from Jackson's security team revealed Vincent meeting with rival organizations, digital evidence of coordinated efforts to dismantle Jackson's empire from within. The betrayal extended beyond self-preservation into active sabotage orchestrated over months. Emma discovered coded markers in the translation documents, subtle linguistic patterns suggesting the information originated from federal informants. Vincent hadn't just betrayed Jackson, he'd been collaborating with authorities while framing her as the conduit for their investigation. Her university advisor's unexpected call added another layer of complication, the financial aid office questioning her sudden wealth and reduced class attendance. Vincent's plan included undermining every aspect of her life, leaving no refuge if his plot succeeded. With trembling hands, Emma photographed the appointment calendar on Jackson's desk, confirming he had no knowledge of the translation request. The betrayal targeted both of them, using her as the conduit for bringing down Jackson's entire operation. Jackson's unexpected early return to the office left Emma no time to escape without explanation. When he demanded to know why she was in his private office, the truth spilled out: the documents, Vincent's phone conversation, and the elaborate setup designed to implicate them both. Initially skeptical, Jackson's expression shifted as he examined the unauthorized documents and verified schedule discrepancies, his face transforming with cold fury that reminded Emma exactly who she'd aligned herself with in this dangerous game. "You could have taken these documents directly to authorities to save yourself," Jackson observed, studying her with new intensity. "Why warn me instead?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was prepared to articulate. Emma's response came with unexpected honesty. "Because despite everything, I believe you would have done the same for me." Jackson moved with terrifying efficiency once convinced of Vincent's betrayal, mobilizing his most trusted operatives while instructing Emma to continue normal activities. "Act as though you're translating those documents," he directed, his voice devoid of the warmth she'd grown accustomed to. The trap reversed, now targeting Vincent, with Emma playing her role in the dangerous theater of loyalty and betrayal. Each translation page she pretended to complete tightened the noose around the man who had underestimated her connection to his boss. Caught between her moral compass and survival instincts, Emma made a decision that would irrevocably alter her path. She secretly copied select information from the documents before returning them, insurance policy and potential escape route rolled into one desperate act. 3 days of excruciating tension followed as Emma maintained her routine, while Jackson's investigation into Vincent's betrayal proceeded behind the scenes. The bistro where everything began now felt like a distant memory from someone else's life. "Your brother's showing remarkable progress," the therapist informed Emma during a follow-up appointment. Whatever arrangements you made for this specialist are giving him a real chance at recovery. The good news twisted like a knife in Emma's conscience. Michael's improving mental health, purchased with moral compromise and deepening entanglement in Jackson's criminal world. The price of saving one life might be her own soul. Vincent made his move the following evening, intercepting Emma as she left the university library. "Get in the car," he ordered, revealing a concealed weapon beneath his expensive coat. "Time we discussed your future with the organization." The drive to an abandoned factory at the city's edge passed in tense silence, Emma's mind racing through possible escape scenarios. Vincent's face remained impassive, betraying nothing beyond obvious intent to remove her permanently. "Jackson's judgment has become compromised since you appeared," Vincent stated as he forced her into the empty building. "Sentiment is weakness in our business, something I tried to teach him repeatedly over 12 years of loyalty." Concrete floors echoed with their footsteps as Vincent marched her toward a back office, passing empty equipment and forgotten machinery. The isolation confirmed Emma's worst fears. No witnesses meant no reason to keep her alive after getting what he wanted. "The documents you translated, where are the originals?" Vincent demanded, pressing the gun against her ribs. "Jackson thinks he destroyed all evidence, but I know you're too smart to leave yourself unprotected." Emma's response was interrupted by the factory door crashing open, metal groaning as Jackson entered with 2 armed operatives. His expression remained eerily calm as he assessed the standoff, eyes fixing on the weapon pressed against Emma's side. 12 years of loyalty means nothing when betrayal follows," Jackson replied, advancing slowly despite the danger. "Did you think I wouldn't verify her story? That I wouldn't discover the accounts you've been skimming from for years?" The revelation of deeper betrayal registered on Vincent's face, momentary shock providing the distraction Emma needed. She drove her elbow into his solar plexus, creating precious distance between herself and the gun as she dove behind industrial equipment. Gunfire erupted, bullets ricocheting off metal surfaces as Emma crawled desperately toward an exit. Jackson's voice carried over the chaos, commanding his operatives while exchanging shots with his former lieutenant. Through the chaos, Emma spotted a fallen guard's phone, managing to send her location to the emergency contact programmed in her device, her linguistics professor, who had once mentioned counterterrorism consultation work. Help would come, though whether before or after bloodshed claimed more lives remained uncertain. Vincent's backup arrived, outnumbering Jackson's remaining loyal operatives and forcing them into defensive positions. The choreography of violence escalated with practiced precision, professionals executing well-rehearsed patterns of territory control and tactical advancement. A spray of bullets shattered windows above, raining glass that sliced Emma's cheek as she crawled toward a maintenance door. Her linguistic studies felt absurdly distant, philosophical debates about language exchanged for immediate survival instincts and the metallic smell of blood on concrete. A stray bullet grazed Emma's shoulder, hot pain blazing across her skin as she fought to remain conscious. The academic who once worried about thesis deadlines now struggled to escape crossfire between warring criminals, her new reality stripped of any remaining illusion. Blood loss and adrenaline made the world tilt sickeningly as Emma finally reached a side door. The cool night air hit her face as she stumbled into the alley, survival instinct propelling her forward despite growing weakness in her limbs. A familiar black sedan screeched to a halt beside her, Jackson emerging from the driver's seat with blood staining his custom suit. "It's over," he stated simply, reaching for her injured shoulder with unexpected gentleness. "Vincent won't betray anyone again." The drive to Jackson's private physician passed in hazy silence, shock setting in as Emma processed how completely her life had transformed. The server who once dreamed of linguistics degrees now sat bloodied beside a man who had killed to protect both her and his criminal empire. Dislocated shoulder, mild concussion, and significant blood loss, the doctor reported to Jackson while treating Emma's wounds. "She needs complete rest for at least 2 weeks, no translation work, no university, nothing stressful." Jackson nodded curtly, his usual composure restored despite the violence of preceding hours. Only occasional glances toward Emma betrayed any concern beyond professional interest in his translator's recovery. Recovery took place not in Emma's apartment but in a secluded estate Jackson claimed belonged to a business associate. The isolation provided safety but also forced constant proximity between patient and protector. The police found Vincent's body, Jackson informed her on the 3rd morning, setting a breakfast tray beside her bed with unexpected domesticity. Official report says gang violence, technically accurate if not complete. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the tea, the reality of her situation crystallizing with brutal clarity. She was now witness to murder, recipient of blood money, and dependent on a criminal's protection, lines crossed that could never be uncrossed. My organization is vulnerable while I handle this situation, Jackson admitted, surprising her with his candor. Vincent's betrayal has created opportunities for rivals to move against my interests. The unexpected vulnerability in this confession shifted something between them, Jackson revealing weaknesses he would show to no one else. Emma recognized the dangerous intimacy developing between captive and captor, victim and protector, student and teacher. During her second week of recovery, Jackson received news that his primary distribution center had been seized by authorities acting on anonymous tips. His carefully controlled facade cracked momentarily, revealing panic beneath his composed exterior. "They're closing in from all sides," he murmured, pacing the estate's living room while making rapid phone calls in multiple languages. "Someone is systematically dismantling everything I've built over 15 years. Emma's suggestion came hesitantly. "Your legitimate businesses, the import company, the restaurants, the art gallery, they're still untouched. Perhaps it's time to consider transitioning completely to legal enterprises." Jackson's laughter held no humor as he dismissed the idea. "My legitimate businesses exist to launder money from the others. Without the criminal enterprises, everything collapses, including protection for you and your brother's medical care." The harsh truth hung between them, both acknowledging the toxic dependency their relationship had cultivated. Emma's moral compromise had grown from one desperate decision into a lifestyle she could no longer easily escape. Their isolation ended abruptly when an unexpected visitor arrived. Catherine, the wife of Jackson's associate, appeared with urgency and without her husband. "David has been arrested," she announced without preamble. "They're coming for you next." Catherine's proposal was shocking in its simplicity. She had connections with federal prosecutors willing to offer immunity in exchange for specific information. Not everything, just enough to satisfy them while preserving Jackson's core assets. The proposal included an unexpected component, evidence implicating higher-profile targets that would satisfy federal authorities more than Jackson's mid-level organization. Catherine had compiled dossiers on politicians and corporate executives whose corruption dwarfed Jackson's criminal activities. "My husband never knew my true background," Catherine explained, removing designer sunglasses to reveal eyes sharp with intelligence. "Former intelligence operative repurposed to domestic monitoring. My marriage was my cover, not my identity." The revelation transformed their power dynamic instantly, Emma and Jackson recognizing they were pieces in a larger game orchestrated by invisible players. Their relationship, built on translation and cultural exchange, had inadvertently intersected with national security operations beyond their comprehension. Jackson's refusal was immediate and predictable, but Emma noticed calculation behind his eyes. For the first time since she'd known him, the unshakable crime boss was considering compromise instead of dominance or destruction. The plan formed over 3 tense days of negotiation, with Catherine serving as unexpected mediator between Jackson's criminal world and legitimate authorities. Limited immunity in exchange for information about international suppliers would satisfy prosecution while allowing Jackson to preserve domestic operations. "Why are you helping him?" Emma asked Catherine during a rare moment alone. "Your husband is already imprisoned. Cooperating with Jackson seems counterproductive to your interests." Catherine's smile held secrets deeper than Emma could fathom. "David was never the real power in our marriage," she confessed. "Jackson's organization benefits from my connections in ways even he doesn't fully comprehend." The revelation reshuffled Emma's understanding of power dynamics she'd been observing. Women in this world weren't merely decorative accessories, but often the hidden architects behind seemingly male-dominated structures. Their carefully constructed deal collapsed when federal agents raided the estate without warning, clearly operating on fresh intelligence that bypassed Catherine's carefully cultivated channels. The negotiated surrender transformed into chaos as Jackson pulled Emma through a hidden exit tunnel. "Someone betrayed us again," Jackson growled as they escaped into surrounding woods, his hand gripping Emma's wrist with painful intensity. "Whoever's dismantling my organization knew exactly where to find us." The realization hit Emma with stunning clarity. The copied documents she'd secured as insurance had somehow reached authorities. Her well-intentioned protection strategy had accelerated the very collapse she now fled alongside Jackson. Their desperate journey led them back to where everything began, Nate's Bistro, now closed for renovation but still accessible through service entrances Jackson somehow knew intimately. The familiar setting felt surreal after weeks of upheaval and violence. "We need to separate," Jackson decided, his tactical mind working through limited options. "They want me, not you. If you walk away now, claim coercion or Stockholm Syndrome. Your brother's care continues through offshore accounts." Emma's refusal surprised even herself. "Running solves nothing. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Not because I approve of what you've done, but because I understand why you did it." The standoff began at midnight when federal agents surrounded the restaurant, their negotiator's voice amplified through speakers demanding Jackson's peaceful surrender. Inside, Jackson and Emma sat at the same table where their story had begun months earlier. "I never gave you my empire from our first bet," Jackson realized with unexpected laughter, the absurdity of remembering such detail in their current circumstances breaking through tension. "You earned it fair and square with your Mandarin." Emma reached across the table, taking his hand in a gesture acknowledging their complicated journey. "The empire was never what changed my life," she replied softly. "It was discovering that people are rarely what they first appear to be." Outside the restaurant, media vans assembled alongside tactical units, cameras ready to capture the fall of a notorious criminal figure. The narrative already being constructed would flatten their complex story into simplistic headlines: villain captured, innocent saved, erasing the moral ambiguities that define their actual experience. Through the restaurant's security feed, they watched federal agents establishing perimeter positions with military precision. "They're being careful," Jackson observed with professional respect for their tactical approach. "Someone told them about my combat background." Emma noticed a familiar face among the federal commanders, her linguistics professor, now revealed in tactical gear with credential badges. The separate world she tried to maintain had collapsed into a single narrative, academic mentor and law enforcement converging at this climactic moment. Their moment of connection shattered as the front doors burst open, tactical teams swarming the restaurant with weapons drawn. Jackson rose slowly, hands raised in a gesture of surrender that seemed foreign on a man accustomed to commanding rather than yielding. "Jackson Nate, you're under arrest," announced the lead agent, reciting charges that would ensure decades of imprisonment if convicted. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists with finality as Emma watched, heart constricting despite knowing this moment was inevitable. In his final free act, Jackson turned to Emma and spoke in perfect Mandarin, "Tell them everything, the good and the bad. My redemption was always impossible, but perhaps through your truth, something better emerges from what we built together." 6 months later, Emma sat in a federal courthouse, hands clasped tightly as she prepared to testify in Jackson's trial. Her immunity deal, secured through cooperation and the documents she'd preserved, allowed her to speak freely about the organization she'd witnessed from inside. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth?" the court official intoned as Emma placed her hand on the Bible. Her affirmation came clear and steady, commitment to honesty now replacing the moral compromises of her past. Jackson watched her from the defendant's table, expression unreadable to most observers but conveying subtle acknowledgement to Emma. Their shared language now extended beyond Mandarin or English. They communicated in the silent vocabulary of two people who had seen each other's true natures. Her testimony walked the delicate line between truth and mercy, providing evidence of criminal activity while contextualizing Jackson's complex character. The prosecution wanted a monster. The defense claimed coercion. Emma offered something more authentic, a flawed human caught in systems of his own making. The defendant showed capacity for both extraordinary cruelty and unexpected compassion, she concluded after hours of questioning. His organization destroyed lives through illegal activities, yet also provided medical care for my brother when legitimate systems failed us. The jury's deliberation lasted 4 days before returning with a verdict acknowledging the case's complexity. Jackson received an 18-year sentence instead of life, punishment tempered with possibility of eventual redemption through testimony of the server he'd once challenged. Nate's Bistro reopened under new management, with Emma now holding partial ownership thanks to a legitimate business arrangement Jackson had established before his arrest. The establishment became a symbol of second chances rather than criminal enterprise. Emma completed her linguistics degree while managing the restaurant, her thesis examining moral ambiguity in translation with insights drawn from personal experience. Professors noted her unusual depth of understanding when discussing how language shapes ethical perception across cultures. Michael's recovery progressed steadily, the specialized treatment having arrested his psychological trauma before Jackson's legitimate medical foundation continued coverage. The foundation became Emma's focus beyond academics, channeling resources toward families facing similar healthcare crises. Twice monthly, Emma visited the federal prison, conversing with Jackson in both languages as he served his sentence. Their relationship defied simple categorization, not quite friendship, beyond business, yet bound by experiences too profound to abandon. "You could have disappeared with the money," Jackson observed during one visit, his face thinner but eyes still sharp with intelligence. "Instead, you built something lasting from the wreckage of my mistakes." Emma's smile acknowledged the observation's truth. "We're defined not by our worst moments or best intentions, but by what we choose to build after everything falls apart," she replied, wisdom earned through their shared journey. The restaurant hosted weekly Mandarin cultural nights, creating community spaces where immigrants and locals connected through language, food, and stories. Emma's initial linguistic talents had evolved into bridge building between worlds that rarely intersected peacefully. On quiet evenings, she sometimes remembered their first encounter, his arrogant challenge, her desperate acceptance of the wager. The memory no longer carried bitterness or regret but stood as the unexpected catalyst for transformation neither could have anticipated. Jackson's legitimate businesses continued operating under trusts he'd established, providing employment and stability in communities once exploited by his criminal enterprises. Redemption came not through erasing past sins but through creating future possibilities that might balance the scales. Emma's graduation ceremony coincided with Michael's one-year anniversary of completing therapy, twin celebrations of perseverance through seemingly impossible circumstances. As she accepted her diploma, Emma spotted Catherine in the audience, a subtle nod acknowledging their shared role in reshaping a criminal empire into something with potential for good. The linguistics department offered Emma a teaching position focusing on translation studies and cultural interpretation, skills honed through life-threatening circumstances now redirected toward academic pursuit. Her unique perspective on language as both bridge and weapon brought unprecedented depth to the curriculum. Jackson's prison correspondence included philosophical discussions that Emma incorporated anonymously into her graduate research, exploring how moral boundaries blur when survival and protection of loved ones conflict with societal laws. Their exchanges evolved into a manuscript examining ethical relativism through real-world application. International students flocked to Emma's translation workshops, unaware her expertise derived from high-stakes negotiations where misinterpreted words carried lethal consequences. The authenticity in her teaching stemmed from experiences too complex to share yet too valuable to abandon. Years later, as Emma stood before her first published book, a scholarly work on translation ethics in crisis situations, she reflected on the journey that began with a simple challenge in a modest Chicago bistro. The empire Jackson had offered wasn't measured in money or power, but in the transformation of two people who discovered that understanding another's language meant seeing the world through their eyes, with all the danger, beauty, and moral complexity that vision entailed. And in that understanding, they had found something neither expected, not redemption perhaps, but the possibility that even the darkest stories could illuminate paths toward light. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my channel and tell me where you are watching from in the comments.